Imagine walking into a luxury car dealership, only to be told to leave because of the color of your skin and the clothes you're wearing. The manager laughs, mocks you, and even threatens to call security. But here's the twist he never saw coming. The man he tried to humiliate wasn't just a customer. He was the brand new owner of the dealership. What happened next shocked everyone in the room. The words cut through the air like a blade. Every head in the luxury car dealership turned at once. Customers froze mid-step. Conversations died down. And even the sound of typing from the receptionist's desk stopped. The voice belonged to Richard, the dealership's longtime manager, a man known for his arrogance, his sharp tongue, and his quick judgments. The target of his outburst? A young black man who had just walked in, wearing simple jeans, a plain shirt, and sneakers. Nothing about his appearance screamed millionaire or luxury buyer, and to Richard that was all the proof he needed. The young man hadn't even made it past the entrance before Richard's words hit him. Some customers whispered to one another, shocked at the bluntness. A mother pulled her child closer, while another couple glanced at each other, visibly uncomfortable. But Richard, he didn't care. In his mind, he was simply protecting the dealership from what he assumed was a waste of time. "Sir, I just want to take a look," the young man began, his tone calm and respectful. But Richard cut him off with a wave of his hand, smirking. "Save it! Cars here cost more than your yearly salary. If you're just here to dream, do it somewhere else. Maybe the used lot down the street will welcome you." The dealership's floor, filled with glossy, high-end cars worth six figures, suddenly felt like a stage for humiliation. The young man stood quietly, but his eyes were sharp, his expression unreadable. He didn't lash out. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he studied Richard, with a patience that only comes from someone who knows, a secret far bigger than the insult being thrown his way. Because what Richard didn't know was this. The man he was trying to kick out wasn't just another walk-in customer. He wasn't there to browse or even to buy. He was the brand new owner of the entire dealership, the one who had signed the papers, made the investment, and now held the power to decide the future of every employee inside those walls. In just a few moments, Richard's arrogance would come crashing down. But for now, the audience, the customers, the staff, and even the manager himself had no idea. The tables were about to turn in the most dramatic way possible. Richard had been at the dealership for more than 15 years, and in that time he believed he had seen it all. In his mind, he could size up a person in seconds and know whether they were a serious buyer or just another time waster. He wore that ability like a badge of honor, bragging to his co-workers that he could read people better than anyone else. But what Richard called intuition was really something far uglier: judgment, rooted in arrogance and prejudice. To him, image was everything. If a customer stepped through the glass doors wearing an expensive tailored suit, Richard's smile appeared instantly. He would shake their hand firmly, offering them a tour of the latest high-end models, already picturing the commission he might pocket. If someone rolled up in a flashy sports car, he made sure the staff treated them like royalty, pouring them bottled water and offering them coffee from the private lounge. These were the kinds of people Richard believed belonged in his showroom. But if someone came in looking too casual, or worse, if they didn't fit, Richard's narrow idea of what wealth looked like, he would dismiss them before they even spoke. A simple shirt and jeans? A pair of worn-out sneakers? To Richard, that screamed broke. And when the customer happened to be black or from a minority background, his judgment became even harsher. He didn't say it out loud, but his actions spoke volumes. The fake smiles disappeared, his tone became sharp, and his patience vanished. He often justified it to himself by claiming he was protecting the brand. In his eyes, the dealership was too prestigious to waste time on people who couldn't afford its cars. He saw himself as a gatekeeper, making sure only the right kind of buyers were allowed to sit behind the wheel of those gleaming vehicles. But the truth was much simpler and much uglier. Richard wasn't protecting anything. He was feeding his own ego, wrapping his prejudice in the language of professionalism. What he thought was sharp business instinct was nothing more than a bad habit of judging people by their clothes, their skin, and his own shallow assumptions. And that habit, on this day, was about to cost him everything. Marcus pushed open the glass doors of the dealership with quiet confidence. He wasn't dressed to turn heads, just a plain white shirt, a pair of simple jeans and clean sneakers. No flashy watch, no gold chains, no designer jacket. To the average person, he looked like any other young man who might be browsing cars on a Saturday afternoon. But Marcus wasn't average, and this wasn't just another Saturday. What nobody in that room knew was that Marcus had recently finalized the purchase of the entire dealership chain. Not just this location, but several across the state. He wasn't there to window shop or haggle over prices. He wasn't even there as a customer. He was the new boss, the man who signed the checks, the one who now had the power to hire, fire, and reshape the future of the business. This was supposed to be a proud moment, his first official visit as the owner. He had imagined it differently. Maybe a warm greeting, a quick tour of the showroom, and introductions to the staff who would soon be working under his leadership. Instead, the first thing he received was an insult hurled across the floor by a man who didn't know him, didn't ask his name, and didn't care to listen. "Get out," Richard had barked earlier, his words echoing through the glossy showroom filled with six-figure cars. "People like you can't afford cars here." Marcus could feel the sting of those words, but he refused to let it show. He stood tall, his calm demeanor masking the storm that anyone else in his position might have unleashed. He had been judged too many times before, by teachers, by strangers, even by waiters at restaurants who assumed he couldn't pay the bill. But today was supposed to be different. Today, he had walked in not as a man fighting to prove himself, but as someone who already had. And yet, in a twist of cruel irony, instead of respect, he was met with rejection. Instead of a handshake, he was told to leave. Before Marcus could even say, "Hello, I'm your new boss," Richard had written him off completely. What Richard didn't realize was that with every arrogant word, he was digging a hole deeper and deeper beneath his own career. Marcus kept his tone steady, refusing to match Richard's hostility. "Sir, I'd like to take a look at the new SUV lineup," he said, his voice calm, respectful, almost formal. It was the type of request any potential customer might make. Simple, reasonable, and polite. But Richard didn't hear politeness. He didn't see possibility. All he saw was someone he had already decided didn't belong. Rolling his eyes dramatically, he let out a heavy sigh loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. His expression screamed annoyance, as if Marcus had asked for something outrageous. "Look!" Richard snapped, his voice laced with condescension. "We don't give tours to window shoppers. These cars are worth more than your yearly salary. Why don't you try the used car lot down the street?" The insult hit like a slap. His words weren't just dismissive, they were humiliating. A couple standing by a shiny black sedan froze in shock, exchanging glances that said, "Did he really just say that out loud?" Another man in a business suit frowned, shifting uncomfortably as though he couldn't believe what he was witnessing. Even the receptionist at the front desk lowered her gaze, clearly embarrassed for the manager's behavior but too afraid to step in. Richard, however, seemed to enjoy the spotlight his cruelty created. He folded his arms, standing tall like a guard protecting sacred ground. To him, Marcus was nothing but a nuisance, someone wasting his valuable time, someone who needed to be pushed out quickly so he could return to serious buyers. Marcus, meanwhile, didn't flinch. His calm smile remained, though his eyes sharpened with quiet intensity. He had dealt with this exact type of arrogance before. He knew what it felt like to be underestimated, to be treated as though his worth could be measured by the clothes on his back. But today, Marcus wasn't the one who would be embarrassed. Richard was. Around them, the whispers grew louder. Customers were beginning to take sides. Some shook their heads in disgust, while others whispered angrily, "That's not right." Without realizing it, Richard had turned a private insult into a public humiliation for himself. And Marcus? He was just waiting for the perfect moment to reveal who he really was. Instead of snapping back, Marcus did something that caught everyone off guard. He smiled. Not a forced smile, not a nervous one, but a calm, steady smile that said he wasn't shaken. It wasn't the reaction Richard was expecting. Most people, after being humiliated in front of strangers, would argue, raise their voice, or storm out. But Marcus had lived through moments like this before. He had been underestimated, dismissed, and disrespected more times than he could count. And every time, he had learned to control his emotions, to let patience speak louder than anger. But today was different. Today, Marcus wasn't just another man being looked down on. He wasn't powerless. He wasn't someone trying to prove he belonged. Today, he held the ultimate card of power, ownership. The irony wasn't lost on him. He didn't just belong in this dealership. He owned it. Every single car on that showroom floor, every desk, every employee paycheck, it all fell under his name now. Richard just didn't know it yet. So instead of showing frustration, Marcus tilted his head slightly and asked in a calm, almost playful tone, "Are you sure you don't want to show me the cars?" The question sounded harmless, but it carried weight, a challenge hidden beneath politeness. Richard, however, was blind to it. He scoffed loudly, as if Marcus had told the funniest joke of the year. "Listen," he said, his words dripping with arrogance. "I know when someone's wasting my time. And you, my friend, are wasting it. If you don't leave now, I'll have security escort you out." A few customers nearby gasped. The tension in the room thickened. People could feel that Richard was crossing a line, not just as a manager, but as a human being. The receptionist bit her lip nervously, glancing between Marcus and Richard, silently wishing someone would intervene. But Marcus? He stayed exactly where he was, calm and unshaken. His smile didn't fade, his hands didn't clench, his voice didn't rise. He let Richard dig his own grave word by word, because Marcus knew, in just a few moments, the entire room would see exactly who was wasting whose time. Richard had finally had enough. His face tightened with irritation as he reached toward the desk phone. "That's it," he muttered. "I'll have security escort you out." His voice carried across the room, sharp and commanding, like he was putting an end to some grand disruption. But before his hand touched the receiver, Marcus moved. Calmly, without a word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. No anger, no shouting, just a quiet, deliberate action. With a simple swipe of his finger, the screen lit up. Then with steady hands, he turned it toward Richard. On the glowing display was a PDF document stamped and signed in bold lettering. It wasn't a bank statement. It wasn't a loan approval. It was something far more powerful. The title at the top read, "Ownership Transfer Agreement," and right below it, in black and white, the name was clear as day, Marcus Johnson, owner. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. Richard leaned closer, squinting, his eyes widening with every word he read. His hand slipped away from the phone on the desk. The color drained from his face, leaving him pale. His jaw slackened, hanging open like a door left ajar. The confidence that had fueled his arrogance just seconds ago evaporated instantly. The silence in the dealership was deafening. Every single person who had been watching from the sidelines, the suited man by the sedan, the mother with her child, the receptionist at her desk, now leaned forward, eager to catch every detail. The customers who had cringed at Richard's insults were now wide-eyed with anticipation, sensing that something incredible was unfolding right before them. One whisper cut through the stillness. "Wait! He's the owner?" Another customer gasped softly, covering her mouth with her hand. Richard tried to speak, but the words refused to form. His throat tightened, his mind scrambled. He had spent the last 10 minutes belittling the very man who now controlled his paycheck, his position, and his future. And Marcus? He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. He simply held the phone steady, letting the truth speak for itself. In that single moment, the balance of power shifted entirely. Marcus lowered his phone slowly, sliding it back into his pocket, and then he turned to face Richard directly. His calm expression was gone now, replaced with authority. His voice cut through the silence, steady, deep, and commanding. "I came here today to meet my staff," Marcus began, his words deliberate. "I expected professionalism, respect, a welcome into the business I've just invested in." He let the weight of his sentence hang in the air before continuing. "But instead I've been insulted, judged, and told I don't belong." Every eye in the showroom was locked on him. Customers leaned forward, employees froze where they stood, and Richard looked like he wanted to disappear into the polished floor beneath his feet. "Well, guess what?" Marcus's tone sharpened, his voice rising slightly with power. "I own this place. Every car in this showroom, every office, every paycheck. This dealership and several others like it now belong to me." He took a step forward, closing the gap between himself and the stunned manager. "And I don't tolerate disrespect, not towards me, And not towards any customer who walks in here. Ever. The words exploded like thunder. The room erupted in murmurs, shockwaves spreading across the floor. Some customers shook their heads in disbelief, whispering, "Did you hear that? He's the owner." Others couldn't contain their smiles, nodding in approval as if they had just witnessed justice served right before their eyes. Then came the glow of phone screens. One by one, customers raised their cameras, hitting record, eager to capture the unbelievable moment, a moment they knew would travel far beyond the walls of this dealership. The arrogant manager being humbled, the new owner standing tall, the entire power dynamic flipping in seconds. It was the kind of story that people craved to share. The receptionist, who had been watching quietly with guilt written all over her face, now sat a little straighter, almost proud. The suited man by the sedan began clapping softly, breaking the tension. Within seconds, a ripple of applause moved through the room. Marcus didn't smile, didn't boast. He simply stood his ground, owning not just the dealership, but the moment. Richard's lips trembled as he tried to recover. The confidence that had once carried his voice now cracked under pressure. "Sir, I didn't know. I thought," he stammered, his face pale, his forehead glistening with sweat. His hands, which had once been firmly planted on his hips in arrogance, now fidgeted nervously at his sides. The eyes of every customer and employee in the room burned into him, stripping away the power he thought he had. But Marcus didn't let him finish. His voice cut through the air like a blade, sharp, unwavering, commanding attention. "That's exactly the problem." The words landed heavy and Richard froze. "You judged me before you knew me," Marcus continued, stepping closer. His calm demeanor carried more weight than any shout could. "You didn't ask my name. You didn't ask what I came here for. You looked at my skin, my clothes, and in an instant, you decided I wasn't worth your time." A ripple of murmurs swept across the showroom again. Customers nodded, whispering, "He's right." Employees lowered their gazes, some ashamed. Others secretly relieved that someone was finally calling Richard out. Marcus's voice grew firmer. "And if this is how you treat me, the owner of this place, then I have to ask, how many other customers have you insulted? How many people have you driven away from this business because of your arrogance? Because of your prejudice?" The weight of those questions hung in the air like a heavy fog. Richard's mouth opened, but no words came. He tried to speak, tried to defend himself, but the truth was undeniable. He had done this before. Too many times, too many people. And now his ugly behavior had finally caught up to him. In front of an audience that would not forget what they'd seen. The arrogance that once fueled Richard had melted completely, leaving only fear. His face flushed red, then pale again as the realization hit him. His career, the job he had clung to for over 15 years, was now dangling by the thinnest of threads. And Marcus, the man he had mocked just minutes earlier, was the one holding the scissors. Marcus shifted his focus away from Richard and turned toward the customers, his voice carrying not just authority but conviction. "This dealership is under new ownership," he declared, scanning the faces in front of him. "And I promise you this, every single person who walks through those doors will be treated with respect." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. People leaned in closer, drawn to the certainty in his tone. "It won't matter if you arrive in a $1,000 suit or a pair of sneakers. You'll get the same level of service, the same courtesy, the same dignity. Because dignity," he said, pressing a hand to his chest, "is not something you earn. It's something you deserve." The silence that followed lasted only a moment. Then came the applause. It started softly, a single clap from the suited man by the sedan, then grew louder as others joined in. Soon the entire showroom echoed with clapping, the sound bouncing off the polished cars and glass walls. Customers who had watched uncomfortably just minutes earlier now stood taller, nodding with approval, smiling as though they had just witnessed a victory for everyone who had ever been disrespected. A woman with her young son walked up to Marcus, shaking his hand firmly. "Thank you," she said, her eyes filled with gratitude. People needed to hear that. The boy beside her looked up at Marcus like he was a superhero, wide-eyed and inspired. Another man who had recorded the entire confrontation on his phone reached out to shake Marcus's hand as well. "You have no idea how much this means," he said. "People don't forget moments like this. Even the receptionist, who had shrunk in her chair earlier, now stood proudly, her expression soft with relief. For years she had watched Richard dismiss people unfairly, powerless to stop him. Now, for the first time, she felt a change in the air, a promise of a better, kinder workplace. The atmosphere in the dealership transformed in minutes. What had begun as tension, discomfort, and prejudice had turned into hope, respect, and inspiration. Marcus hadn't just introduced himself as the new owner. He had set the tone for everything this dealership was about to become. Richard was fired that very same day. The decision wasn't born out of anger or a thirst for revenge. It was about integrity. Marcus knew that keeping someone like Richard in charge would poison the very foundation of what he wanted his dealership to represent. A manager who judged, humiliated, and disrespected people had no place in a business that Marcus intended to build on fairness and trust. It wasn't an easy moment. Richard had been with the dealership for over 15 years, but Marcus understood. Something critical, experience, doesn't matter if it isn't paired with respect. And so, with a firm but calm tone, Marcus ended Richard's tenure and made it clear to everyone that no one, no matter how long they had been around, was above the standard of dignity. In the weeks that followed, Marcus carefully selected a new manager, someone whose reputation was built not just on sales numbers, but on kindness and genuine customer care. This new leader greeted every person who entered the showroom with a smile, whether they looked like a millionaire or a mechanic. Slowly but surely, the culture of the dealership began to change. Customers who had once felt unwelcome now returned, sharing their stories of being treated with warmth and respect. It didn't take long for the story of what had happened to spread far beyond the dealership walls. Someone had recorded the confrontation on their phone, and within days, the video was trending online. Headlines read, "New owner, humiliates arrogant, manager with perfect calm and man insulted at car dealership, reveals he's the boss." Social media lit up with praise. People admired not only the shocking reveal, but the way Marcus had handled it, without yelling, without losing his temper, but with dignity and strength. The dealership saw an unexpected surge in visitors, not just to buy cars, but to shake Marcus's hand, to thank him, to say they felt proud that someone had finally stood up against prejudice in such a powerful way. Later that evening, as the lights dimmed and the last customers left, Marcus walked slowly through the showroom floor. His hand brushed the hood of one of the gleaming SUVs, and he whispered to himself, "This isn't just about selling cars. It's about changing minds." And in that quiet moment, he knew he was doing exactly that. And that's the story of how arrogance met its match and respect won the day. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more inspiring moments like this, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that could change the way you see the world. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.